Welcome back, Indiana Sports Beat Radio, on this Tuesday of this holiday week. Mike DeCourcy, senior writer from the Sporting News, with us, as always, and our good friend K-Bro, Kevin Brockway from CNHI. Mike, you had a piece out, and this is, to me, I heard you in the break, you asked on a scale of 1 to 10 to Kevin, how big was it? To me, this was the biggest thing to happen and bigger than the very first time we started doing this. When expansion started happening, we're like, oh, wow. This one caught me off guard just because they're on the freaking West Coast. I mean, they're in Los Angeles. I was not thinking that they would really go that far, which I'm not saying it was wrong. I think it was probably a stroke of genius because, as I've mentioned many times, now they have the TV markets of Los Angeles, Chicago, Washington, D.C., and Philadelphia.
You left out New York. Don't forget New York.
I don't know how I forgot New York, but yeah, New York.
It's on his hat.
Yeah, I don't know how I forgot because that's the thing.
I gotta say though, Mike, people in New York don't talk about Rutgers.
I know that.
It's like so low on the totem pole, you know.
But the Big Ten doesn't care about that. They will watch Indiana, UCLA basketball. They will watch Michigan, USC. So just being in those markets and accessing those eyeballs, the SEC doesn't have that. The ACC doesn't have that.
Whether or not people in Manhattan or not are watching, I don't know. But let's not forget Jersey, across the river, Newark, Fort Lee, all those places adjacent to New York. Those are big. That's a big population. That's a lot of people. And that's all kind of part of the same deal. And being in, having Rutgers did, get Big Ten Network into cable systems in the New York area as well. So it does matter. I know that, they're not, Rutgers isn't the number one team of, in a city that has the Knicks, Nets, Jets, Mets, et cetera, Yankees. I understand that, but their addition did matter. And it did make a difference. And SC and UCLA have a much greater presence in LA. And so it's going to help with the television contract to become even more lucrative than what was already set to be an exceptionally lucrative deal for the Big Ten.
I just think too, when we talk about the SEC and the Big Ten, just that difference though, it's like the pro sports markets versus the SEC states where that's the team, Alabama's the team. And even in the state of Florida, it's a college sports market, even though you have pro teams. I mean, you have the Miami Heat, I guess, and the Dolphins back in the day, but those are still college sports states. And I think that's kind of the difference. And that's why I think that's why ESPN eyes, the SEC is a prize, but Fox Sports has certainly come in with the Big Ten markets, and maybe they can transform some of those, big cities into college markets. USC and UCLA have always had a stronghold on LA, though. I think they'll do just fine. I think it's a great addition. But some people saying surprise. I don't necessarily, because we were talking about this 2 years ago, weren't we, about USC and UCLA and them moving? I wasn't quite as surprised as some because there was some rumblings about this a couple of years ago that this was going to happen, and but it was definitely a shrewd move by Kevin Warren to pull it off.
I think it will be great for the Big Ten. I think the ratings will be better for USC and UCLA in Los Angeles against these bigger name teams. It's more of an event. But my question now is they can't be done. They have to add 1 to 3 more teams, I think.
Why?
Well,
why do they have
an even number? Well, to keep it at an even number. I think that they
have
will.
An even number.
16, yeah.
Oh, that's right. I think but expansion, I think that they're going to add at least 2 more. I don't
think that they will be in a rush to add anybody that doesn't make it more lucrative. And
so Notre Dame is that team I'm thinking of.
There you go. That was what I was going to say, is that Notre Dame now is the pressure on Notre Dame to finally join a conference. The idea that they have to, I think, is still overplayed. But is it better for them? what does independence do for them at that point when people, when it's we don't know what the playoff will be? Will it be hard for them to get in if they're great? Certainly they don't need the Big Ten or the SEC or anyone to make significant television money. They're already doing that.
That's not, but see, what are they making though? Like 33 million?
I'm not sure exactly what their contract is.
I think it's around 33 million. But if you were a Big Ten team, that's going to be 100 million. And that is a gigantic difference.
Yeah, I mean, it's a huge difference. And that's what Kevin and I were talking about, in the conversation during the break, was that he believes that this is that schools are making the move with the idea of if the athletes become professional in the sense of being paid by the schools to play. Right now, the Big Ten getting more money from television relative to, say, the ACC or the Big 12 or the Pac-12, it makes things easier to move, and you don't ever have to say, no, we can't afford that. But it doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to have a better football team than Clemson or Florida State or North Carolina or whomever, because you can't spend that money on the athletes in order to acquire them. So if you have a move towards professional players, and there's some move in California to try to make that happen through the state legislature, it really hasn't gone anywhere. Believe that it's the National Labor Relations Board attorney who's really been pushing this through various published statements that they should be. I'm not a believer that they necessarily should be, because I don't know where you draw the line on that. You've got a football team, men's basketball, women's basketball, wrestling, baseball, soccer. All right, are they all professional athletes? Well, I mean, they don't make a lot of money in soccer. They sell tickets to it, but they don't sell a lot in most places. Women's basketball, they sell some tickets, but it's not usually a highly lucrative sport, except at various, at a very few schools. Baseball doesn't make much money in most places, maybe some in the SEC, whereas football, men's basketball obviously are significant money-making ventures, or at least high revenue-producing ventures. So how do you decide who's a professional? All of them? None of them? I don't know.
Mike, I will say this with regards to that, and this is interesting. With the advent of these conference networks, what do those non-revenue programs provide, though? They provide programming. Like the Big Ten Network could not be propped up if they didn't have women's soccer programs. So in that respect, they are generating revenue because it's all coming from that pie. Now, you're not getting the ratings, pushed from, say, like obviously a football game or a men's basketball game. But I think the argument can be made, that, hey, we are providing programming for your network, which is providing revenue. I mean, we have games, that are on the Big Ten Network that are propping up your network that, provide programming.
Yeah, I mean, so but that becomes the question. And then the secondary question is, minor league sports in America, not the world's best business. I mean, and I don't know whether or not that changes the dynamic. I'm not saying it does or doesn't. I don't know because we haven't seen it. Does the paid college athlete draw in as many viewers as the college student, college athlete? I don't know. Yeah, I do know that I have friends, family coming to town this weekend, and they wanted to go to see the Indianapolis Indians, and it costs $72. Wow. Not for one ticket, as it would at a lot of sporting events, but for all four. And you don't see AAA baseball on television. The G League only exists because the NBA props it up. Yep. Minor league baseball is, to the extent that it's successful is in part because the major league teams are paying a vast majority of the salaries of the players involved. So again, not the greatest business. And so does college athletics become a minor league sport, or do they continue to exist in their own realm and remain successful? I'm not making any predictions. I'm just saying that that's an issue to consider as they go forward, if they go forward into that direction.
That used to be my argument against paying players, because it was that Castellini argument. Where else are you going to go? Like, are you going to go to the G League and make money, right? And the college brands were always the established brands. But obviously legislation has broken that through, right? That, these players now have to be or at least get rights to be compensated some form in name, image, and likeness. And, who knows what the future will hold with the court cases, but it is an interesting argument with regards to that.
Kevin, I'm just to be clear, I'm fully in favor of name, image, and likeness. I'm really pleased to see how athletes have been doing. I'm at least I'm somewhat agnostic about paying the athletes to play, and then do they have to be still students? All those sort of things come into play, and I'm not as enthusiastic about that as I am about athletes having their own name, image, and likeness rights. I think that absolutely 100% that's been a great move. I
agree. So now coming up, Mike, what is going to happen with oh, daggone, I forgot what my question was, what we were talking about, but expansion. So do you not think that the Big Ten is going to add more?
I don't think first of all, I don't think it's a necessity.
I know may not be a necessity, but making a smart move, thinking, we talked earlier about the potential of Duke and North Carolina, because Kevin thinks the ACC is going to get rated, and I do too, because as a football conference, they suck.
Jim, let me point something out here. What if you signed a contract with an organization, and that organization runs to 2036, and if you leave that organization, you can go work for anybody you want, but you can't get paid? Would you do that? No. Because that's what, from the contractual standpoint right now,
which is amazing that it's that long. I've never even heard of
that's what it is. The ACC's grant of rights runs through 2036. So if you are North Carolina, you have committed your broadcast media rights to the Atlantic Coast Conference through 2036. That's true for Pitt, Syracuse. I think Notre Dame did that for their non-revenue sports or the sports in which they compete. I'm not sure about that. I think they did. They didn't for football, obviously. So it wouldn't be as difficult an out for them. But that's that's the case. And so I don't think the ACC is as vulnerable as it's being portrayed. If it were as easy to get out of a grant of rights as people in the media are suggesting, then Texas and Oklahoma would have played in the SEC last year, let alone this year or next year. None of which is supposed to, they weren't there last year. They're not there this year, and they're not going to be there next year as currently planned, because their grant of rights says that their media rights are tied until 2025, and they don't want to lose that revenue. And they haven't been willing or eager to challenge that in court. Well, why wouldn't they? If it were easy to get out of, why wouldn't they? So I think the check that you'd have to write to get out of that is probably, I think you might be able to find a number where it ultimately works out for you, but you'd have some short-term pain. And also, you still always are at the mercy of the other schools that say, no, we don't want to let you out. Because for the next 13 years, we're in business. We have a viable league. But if we let you out, we become less viable, even with the money that we'd cut up from what you leave behind. So I don't think the ACC is as vulnerable as people believe it to be. I think there are too many schools that have a there's 15 schools in the ACC. Take out Notre Dame, you still have 14. That, if Clemson has a little wanderlust, or Florida State or Carolina, any of them, the other 12 or so are going to say, no, if they leave, we're in trouble. We can't afford that. So I don't care if they write us a check. We still don't want to let them go.
Well, they would need to challenge it. Maybe they could challenge it to pay them the equal amount that they have of what has been being generated. Because if they did that, they would still make money coming to the
They
Big
would.
Ten.
They would. But again, that's not the deal they signed. And so why would you, as Pitt, say, be eager to let Clemson go?
I'm not saying it's going to be easy, but it's something that they should fight for if there was interest. But if that's not the case, then the Big Ten might look elsewhere. But I don't know that they have to do it. It's not that they have to do it. It's just that it's keeping up with the Joneses, basically. Not letting the SEC somehow pull say a North Carolina and a Duke in. Although they don't bring much on the football side, which is where the SEC is mainly known for, they would hugely prop up their basketball in, which they have been better, but not great at.
Well, I think the question is, a lot of discussion about this has been about the role of television networks in all of this. ESPN has a pretty significant investment in the ACC right now. That 2036 is the length of the contract or deal that they have with the ACC. Would ESPN be willing to perhaps sweeten that deal or find other ways to monetize it so that it could be sweetened more? I don't know whether it be a streaming deal or an ACC package that you could buy that might up the revenue, whatever it might be. I don't know. That's for the TV suits to decide. But I do wonder if that's something that they might consider because they have a vested interest in it. They built a network around it. It's not, it's a pretty successful network. They have a lot of shoulder programming. They have Woody Durham in the morning with Mark Packer. So they put some money into that. I mean, it seems to be a thriving network. So wouldn't they be invested in trying to keep it a thriving network? They're not going to write a $60 million check to every ACC school. I'm not saying that, but maybe to close that gap somewhat so it's a bit less uncomfortable.